Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
And we're back, folks, with lecturer Brother Ashra Kwesi. Brother Kwesi, Hotep. Good to have you back, Brother Kwesi.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, because this seems around a sort of...
Yes, I would say yes, sir. It's an honor to be back on your radio show, the African Community University Radio.
Right, because we want to tell folks who are getting excited coming next week is Christmas, and where did Christmas all start from? You know, help us out here, because a lot of folks, they're probably on their way to the mall right now, do that shopping and buying presents, and you know, they set up the Christmas tree and all the traditional trimmings that come along with this holiday. Just explain to our folks how this came about.
Yes, sir. Well, this is a time that nobody wants to hear anything that might disrupt all the lighting and twinkles and all these things that's going on, especially the hysteria of what's going on in the malls and all those type of things. And first of all, I'd like to say that we did this program in the beginning of December on the African origin of Christianity and the origin of Christmas and holidays. And for PKV, Positive Kinetic Vision. And we have to say that a lot of brothers and sisters who heard your radio show definitely came out, and unfortunately they had to turn away a lot of people. But you know, in the future we'll have to make that work for everybody. So it's good to know that people do want to know, Brother Carl, you know, what this all is, instead of just getting caught up in the hysteria of the holiday. And a lot of things that I talk about, Brother Carl, is not something that... you know, you can find these things on. In fact, National Geographic did a thing just a couple days ago on the origin of Christmas and where these things came from and how it was developed out of European pagan holidays. And when I speak of European pagan holidays, I'm speaking of the Germanic tribes. And you got to excuse me here for a minute, because during this time of the season, you know, the colds and the flu, and I unfortunately got a cold at this time. But as I was saying, a lot of these things come out of the Germanic tribes and so forth, and it's been initiated in part of the whole American holiday today. After all, when we look at Europeans, they came here from Europe, okay? So we see many whites who are in this country, they came from Europe. So they carried many of these customs that they had with them. When we look at the tree, which is a very prominent fixture in the whole Christmas holiday, that came from the Germanic tribes. And the Germanic tribes actually worshiped that tree. They worshiped that tree because it represented Thor. And Thor was one of the Nordic gods, okay, the Viking gods, so that they actually worshiped. It's still the name Thursday that we have in the week is named after Thor, in fact. In fact, the trinity of the week of whether Thursday, Friday, is all based off of, actually is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So we see Thor as the father, and Woden as the son, and Freya as the mother. And they actually bow down and worship this tree because it stayed green year-round. You can imagine a tree staying green year-round, and how the Germanic tribe saw this tree in the depth of winter, when everything became barren and all of nature became barren, but that tree, the pine tree. So it became a tree that they actually worshiped. So with the symbolism behind that tree, today still plays the same role that it played with the Germanic tribes, as well as other Europeans, okay, who had that tree, is the bowing down of the tree to get your gift. Is still the bowing down to Thor, is bowing down to the Germanic tribes that we see and that was carried over from the European world. Now, again, when we look at the whole Santa Claus, or whether he be Kris Kringles, and all these other various names and so forth that we see of this character that's referred to as Santa Claus, who actually hypnotizes our children and many of us in terms of bringing us gifts and so forth. All this is still part of the Germanic holidays, or going back even before that time with the Greeks and Romans, meaning that the earliest mention of, or we see of this character of Santa Claus, is actually a corruption of the name St. Nicholas. Okay, now, St. Nicholas, he was a Roman Catholic bishop who lived in the 4th century. And St. Nicholas, a bishop of Myra, the saint honored by the Greeks in Latin around the 6th of December. But what's interesting about the name, when we look at Webster's dictionary, when we look at Saint Nick, now Webster's dictionary refers to Saint Nick as the devil. Now, this is not something that Kwesi is creating. It's the connection that they have with Saint Nick, and the connection with this character of Santa Claus is in Webster's referred to as the devil. Now, in Greece, he was also called Cronus. Now, anyone familiar with Western art would see Cronus as a character who's actually eating his babies, because Cronus actually feared that his children would take over his throne. So you see these pictures of Cronus actually eating his babies. You see the blood flowing down the baby. The head is not on the baby. Now, this is a very powerful Western art, okay, of Cronus. This is not something that's obscure in the Western world. It's a very prominent part of Western art of Cronus. Now, Cronus becomes this character that we know as Santa Claus as well. Now, I know this may be hard, Brother Carl, for some people when we understand the symbolism behind the holidays and so forth. But one of the things, as I said, with Cronus eating his babies and the blood is flowing down the baby, this is the symbol of the candy cane, okay? And the little elf or baby attached to the candy cane. The story is told in the symbols. But, of course, if you don't know the story and the origin of the story, you just see the symbol as it is. So when you see the candy cane, and I show pictures of this to show without question that this is how these things came. Now, of course, when the Romans came in and took over Greece, Cronus becomes Saturnalia. Okay. Now, Saturnalia, like Cronus, still played the same type of role, is that he also killed his babies. He feared that he did not want his children to overtake his throne, so he did not bring them gifts, and this character becomes Saturnalia. So this becomes the Santa Claus character, okay, that we see in the Western world, or what we see in America today. Okay, unbeknownst to us. Now, some of these things, interesting enough, that I've lectured on this for many years about Saturnalia and Cronus and how became part of the Christmas holiday. But of course, for those people who want to know, I mean, some of these things, as I said, Brother Carl, are right there on National Geographic, that they even talk about these things themselves. Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting, because we all go out and, and we see these tree lots, and we even got some of our folks selling the trees, and they don't know, it's just a money venture for most folks, but they don't know people put these in their homes, and they don't know, the origin of why you have a Christmas tree.
No, well, it's like everything else, it's like Las Vegas, I mean, if you want to take people's money, you got to have a lot of things going on, so you're like going to Vegas is like going to a big carnival, lights and bells and all kind of things, and if the people who, leave Las Vegas broke, okay, in some cases they've lost everything, and it's pretty much what the holiday does to many people. They get caught up into, because it's really about picking up the gross national product. And even those of us who are supposed to be of the faith of a Christian, and so forth, and even if one goes by the Bible, as some people say they go by the Bible, okay, I don't know if they go by it or whether they go in it, but even if you went in it, you would find that in Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 2 and 6, it refers to that's the way of the heathen. Now, keep in mind that heathen is a German term that means a heath dweller. Okay, and a heath dweller, these were the pagans. These were the people who were uncivilized. But back to Jeremiah, says these are the people, they say they cut the tree out of the forest. So here the biblical account is giving reference to these Germanic tribes and what they did, okay, these heath dwellers, okay, where we get the name heathen from, where they actually cut the tree, and they talk about in Jeremiah where they deck it with silver and gold, and they say that this is the way of the heathen. Okay, other Germanic tribes that we see in Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 2 and 6, and it's right there. Okay, but again, the people are in a hypnotic state right now. Even though we depend on trees giving us oxygen, they practically cut down the whole forest, this time of the year, for people to put a pine tree, right in their home without people asking any questions in relationship to this. But this is about for us to think about what is going on, okay, to see that why are these things here, okay? These things are here, the whole Germanic tribes, the pagan customs of Europe that you see that people are caught up in. you got to get the people out to spend their money. This is the time of the year, okay, that they depend on people spending money. This is the time of the year that picks up the gross national product. And that's what it's really all about. In reference to the holidays, I think Reverend Shakamusa Bar Shango, who wrote a great book on African people and European holidays, A Mental Genocide. And that's what it is when we see what's going on with these holidays that we're locked into, and we buy into it more than anybody else.
All right, hang on a second, Brother Kwesi, because we've got to take a break here. We've got a traffic and weather update. I want to get into the Immaculate Conception, the birth of Jesus, and all of that.
And now back
To the Carl Nelson Show.
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450.
1450 WOL Radio.
And we're back, folks, discussing the Christmas season with the brother Ashra Kwesi. He's lectured on this for a lot of years, and folks have found out information they never heard before. Brother Kwesi started out with the tree, but what about the other issues, the other things surrounding Christmas, the Immaculate Conception, the birth of Christ? Where did all that come from?
Well, first of all, we have to go back to our own African ancestors, and this is where the story originated from. Although we see that the European version of it, without the African story, there would not have been a European story. And there are temples there back in Egypt that that our ancestors referred to as Kemet, going back thousands of years, telling of this ancient spiritual story of Asar, Aset, and Haru that the Greeks referred to as Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Now, there are temples that, as you know, Carl, for 32 years of my life, I returned back to Kemet, revealing a lot of this information to many brothers and sisters who return back with us. And one of the places that we go is one of the world's first and earliest recorded holy cities called Abtu, that the Arabs refer to as Abydos. And here is the earliest recording of a holy birth. Here's a story that the Kemetic Africans of the Nile Valley, that we refer to as ancient Egyptians today, in a shrine called the Ptah Soka Shrine. Here we see a Set. She is impregnating herself, okay, by her husband Asar. And here we see her impregnated. And in this Ptah Soka Shrine, Brother Carl, at one time we saw her on a donkey. In the early 80s, she was on a donkey. That has been chiseled out. And you see her pregnant. This is the earliest story of a virgin birth and Immaculate Conception story. When the Greeks came in, they actually copied this story of the holy birth. Now, even though at one time the Greeks worshipped Aset, okay, in the form of Isis, and then, of course, when they were conquered by the Romans, they equally picked up this holy story of the Madonna and Child, where she gave birth to her holy child, Haru. Now, this story goes back over 10,000 years ago, an ancient spiritual story. Now, the Romans, during their period, they actually worshipped her in what is known as the Herculaneum worship of the goddess Aset, or Isis. They carried her throughout their empire. They carried her to Gaul, which is now France today. Okay, their Germanic tribes and so forth. Now, when many people travel throughout the European countries and they see the Black Madonna worshipped in France at the Notre Dame and worshipped in Poland, worshipped in Spain, many people ask, why is it a Black Madonna in Europe? That Black Madonna is a Set. That is the ancient African Kemetic virgin birth story that our ancestors created thousands of years ago. But it was during the time of the Byzantine Roman Christians who decided to take this story, but now we see the de-Africanizing of a Set into the European version of the Mary and Jesus story. When you look and ask, why do we see the Black Madonna in the cellar of the Vatican? I have pictures of this. I showed it at the lecture when I was there at PKV, beginning of December. Pope John Paul II, he is the one that had no problems worshiping the Black Madonna and having visual pictures of him shown worshiping the Black Madonna. That Black Madonna in the cellar of the Vatican, as I said, throughout Europe, is the goddess Aset. That is the original story. That is the secret. When the story of the Da Vinci Code movie came out, they alluded to her in a negative sense in terms of pagan and heathen. When it's referred to something coming up out of Africa, then of course it's referred to as pagan and heathen, even though I've dealt with the heathen and the pagans that dealt with the Germanic tribes and the custom of the Christmas holiday and the symbolism that I just talked about. But this is ancient African spirituality that was incorporated into the making of what we see as the Madonna and Child that we see in the Western world today. Now, I know that may be hard for people to see that, considering that we are in this period right now of as we see the birth of the European Jesus, but actually it was around the birth of the sun. It's our ancient ancestors in the Kemetic Nile Valley who saw the birth of the sun at December the 25th. So Haru, that I talked about a second ago, became the personification of the sun at December the 25th. When the Europeans created this story from a character named Serapis, they took from the ancient African Nile Valley story, as I said a second ago. This is all based off of stellar as well as solar events. Now, I know people listening to this may be hard for people to understand, but right now we are in what is actually this day, December the 21st, makes this the winter solstice. This will be the time that the sun is going to its most lowest point. In fact, it will be the darkest days coming all the way up to December the 25th will be the birth of the sun. This is told on the temples and tombs of Egypt for thousands of years, that the Europeans, when we look at the Yuletide literally means the birth of the sun. Now, when we look at the European images of the Mary and Jesus, we got caught into white idolatry, or the worship of white images, and not understanding that this was about cosmology, meaning that when you see the Virgo, that is where they made the Mary from, the Virgo. The sun at December the 25th becomes the European Jesus. All this is based off of cosmology. When you look at the Western church and the symbolism of the church, one has to ask, why do you see one big circle symbolize a zodiac with 12 little circles inside of the large circle? That is the sun going through the constellation. This actually told to us, but if we don't know the symbols, we can't see any of these things that is going on today. So, of course, people would say, so you're saying there wasn't a Jesus? Well, first of all, what we know of Western version of Christianity was created at the Conference of Nicene in 325 A.D. As I said before, when the Greeks came on the scene, conquered Egypt, Alexander, who came in, conquered Egypt, took over, they wanted to be worshipped on the throne of Egypt. So they created and corrupted a czar into this Serapis. Later on, when the Byzantines came in, Serapis simulated into the creation of a Serapis, Jesus. Now, there were African Christians who did not go along with a lot of things that the Romans were doing. They were the Gnostic Christians. They were like a conduit of the ancient spiritual story that I'm talking about. They came from the Nile Valley, from observation of the stellar events in the heavens that were great heroes, became a personification of the movement of the various sun and the stars, that they had part of their initiation. So when you understand the ecumenical conferences like Nicaea, Constantinople, and all these things, and see that this was the creation of European Christianity based off of what they took out of the Nile Valley. For instance, in Ephesus in 431 A.D., Mary's title, the Mother of God, was made official and incorporated into prayers. So here we see that this happened in 431 A.D., the Mother of God, the title of the Virgin Mary, sanctioned by the Council of Ephesus in 431 A.D. Anyone can go to Webster's Dictionary and look up Mother of God, and it will tell you that that title of the Virgin Mary was sanctioned at this council. God had nothing to do with this at that conference of Ephesus in 431 A.D. But what the Gnostics did not agree with was the destroying of the spiritual concept of what our ancestors taught. This time of the year, right now, the winter solstice we're in now, they called that the Ka-Mes. That's the ancient Kemetic word that literally means a spiritual birth, Ka-Mes. Interesting enough, that when you go to Bible dictionary and it says the origin, even though they don't understand the origin of the word Christmas or in its beginning, but that word is formulated from two words, Christ and mess. That came from ka-mess. That means spiritual birth. That spiritual birth was told thousands of years ago, showing that this is the time of a spiritual birth, a spiritual beginning, from the cycle of the old sun coming into a new birth. And this is what we see now when people are talking about the end of the world. It is supposed to take place today, and all these things at 12:21. This is the end of the cycle for the new birth of the Son, for a new kames, or spiritual birth. That later on, the Romans took that in the formulating of the Western world's version of Christianity at these ecumenical conferences, and it became Christmas.
All right, hang on a second, Brother Kwesi. We got to take a break here. 800-450-7876, number to call. Speak to Brother Ashra Kwesi, discussing the season, Christmas, and all that it entails. We'll take your phone calls on 1450 WOL right after this.
And now back
To the Carl Nelson Show.
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450.
1450 WOL Radio.
And we're back, folks, with Brother Ashra Kwesi discussing the season, Christmas as it is, and all the stories and fables around Christmas. So this is not to really turn you off. This is just to educate you so you know what's going on. And when you go to those Christmas dinners and Christmas parties, you'll be able to explain better to folks. Don't get upset if they don't agree with you, though. 800-450-7876, number to call. If you have a question for Dr. Kwesi, let's go to Dr. Ed in D.C. Dr. Ed, you're on with Ashra Kwesi.
Brother Carl Nelson, good to be with you, and good to be with the good doctor today, too. And on your talk about the Black Madonna, which is all the way through Europe, and even in Germany, they call it Schwarze Madonna, and the German word Schwarze means black. I am a scientist, PhD scientist, and I give honors to my grandmother, who was instilling me knowledge of the Bible. And this zodiac calendar that you referred to, that calendar is even used by the astronomers and astrophysicists all over the world, even by NASA, who send aircraft and spacecraft up into space, and astronauts are taught to read the skies and the constellations from the zodiac calendar that the doctor was referring to a few minutes ago. And this is very, very important, because we teach our children, and I teach my kids when I teach science in the university, that we were the first scientists on Earth. And I lend credit to what you have been discussing on your show, and that this is a very important topic you referred to, even in the Bible. And the zodiac calendar refers to the precession of the rotation of Earth's axis by the gravitational field of the moon and the sun and the stars and all that. It takes about 26,000 years for the Earth to possess one complete circle around. And that's been only recently discovered by modern scientists. But guess what? The Egyptians already knew about this, and it's also referred in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah. If you go to the 66 books of the Holy Bible, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 19, verse 19, it is referred to. That precession rate is referred to as God appointed the builders of the Great Pyramids, right? And that pyramid is very accurate, and it's lined up with the zodiac calendar. It's lined up with the precession of the Orion Nebula, and points through the ascending axis of the Great Pyramid exactly to the rotational axis, the pole star. So these are things that you have to be reckoned with. Yes.
All right, Doc, let's give Brother Ashra Kwesi a chance to respond to what you just said. Brother Kwesi?
Yes.
Yes, the gentleman is definitely, on point with the things that he's referring to. For us to understand that our ancestors have calculated the movement of the stars, the movement of various cosmic events for countless thousands of years, especially when we look at right now going into, as I mentioned earlier, with the winter solstice. This is the birth of the sun at December the 25th. And our ancestors saw that the sun became, our great heroes became the personification of the sun, like Haru. And the Europeans copied that in the creation of the European Jesus from the character Serapis, in making the European Jesus the birth of the sun at December the 25th. And here we see is the whole deification of the Europeans, which is actually a cosmic event. even when you look at the three magi, okay, that they refer to as the three wise men. When I was at the lecture in the beginning of December in D.C., and many people came out, which I have visual documentation as my 32 years in documenting this, where people can clearly see what we're talking about. Because sometimes when you're talking on the radio show, a lot of this, especially if someone's hearing it for the first time, unless you have knowledge of it, like the gentleman who just spoke, you would understand some of these things that are going on. But the constellation of Orion, there are 3 stars in Orion's belt. 2 of those stars are in perfect alignment. One's out of alignment. Right now, we can see that when you go outside, we see the constellation of Orion is rising in the east now. And the star system Ceres that our ancestors referred to as Civil Septad, when at December the 25th, those 3 stars will point exactly to that star. What we see, the 3 wise men, is actually the 3 stars in Orion's belt. What we see is the whole Europeanizing of their image, which is a cosmic event, which is a stellar event based off of the 3 stars in Orion's belt. When we look at the Virgo, that became the Virgin Mary. When you look at the Jesus, that became the Son at December the 25th. Anyone who aligned that with the cosmos can see without question that they actually took from the ancient spiritual story of the Nile Valley and incorporated that into Western version of Christianity. Now, when I said earlier that the Gnostics, who were persecuted by the Romans, and when we speak of a Christ, we have to go back to a Gnostic Christ, okay? The Gnostic Christ taught that we all have a Christ, a spirit, not a Christ like a white Jesus inside of us, but I'm talking about a spirit. And our purpose was to evoke that spark within us and to become our own Ka. That the Romans took it and be called the Christ. The Gnostics called it the Charis. So the Christ, that means we are all a Christ, or we're all a spiritual being, okay, within us. This is what our ancestors taught. It's the Romans who corrupted it for the deification of their own image. The black Gnostic Christ held that every man and woman had a divine spark, and through their own spiritual development could reach their own Charis, okay, that the Romans called Christ, or reach their own Ka, that the ancient Kemetic Africans in the Nile Valley, we refer to as ancient Egyptians, called spirit. The Romans are the ones that corrupted this, and from this day out, we have been worshiping this image of this European Jesus, which is actually Serapis, that was created at the Conference of Nicene in 325 A.D. So it's sad that throughout my neighborhood, I see all these plastic white babies, okay, that black families have gotten out of their closet for this time of the year for the deification of a plastic white baby, but they don't deify their own black baby as a divine spark, okay, for their own spiritual development to become their own Charis, or become their own Christ. This is sad. And this is where we are in a spiritual retardation, is what the Western world has done to African people, and especially by taking away our divinity. So when you can't see your own divinity, it's impossible that a people can have a unity to go into eternity, Brother Carl.
But, Brother Kwesi, you even some places on the continent, I go and I see, they've got the Christmas tree and the white baby and the white Jesus as well.
Well, keep in mind, colonialism and neocolonialism and slavery and neo-slavery is the same thing. Keep in mind, that's where the Europeans came first. I was in Nigeria one time and saw a brother spraying snow in his window. In Nigeria, it doesn't snow in Nigeria, so we're even taught to worship the northern hemisphere. Okay, throughout my neighborhood here, black people are putting icicles up and so forth. So it's even the deification of a Nordic climate. Even the climatic condition is where Europeans came from. We're taught to even worship that. Not only their own image as the deity, okay, but even the climatic place where they came from, we're taught to worship.
Wow, amazing. 800-450-7876, number to call. Speak to Brother Ashra Kwesi. Tell you what, Brother Kwesi, you're going to take care of that cough, and we're going to take a break. We come back, we'll talk some more about the season of Christmas, what it is, and all the trappings that go along with it, and where it all started from, because a lot of folks, don't know that it started way back when, that our folks, and it was corrupted, and the Europeans took it over and had us, worshiping trees and stuff like that, Christmas trees. Don't want to turn off your Christmas. Just want to inform you so you'll have information and knowledge as we go through this Christmas season.
Back to the Carl Nelson Show.
On Washington, D.C.'s 1450.
1450 WOL Radio.
And we're back, folks, with Ashra Kwesi, a lecturer, and of course he takes trips to Africa, Egypt in the spring, I think Ethiopia around Christmas time, so-called Christmas time. If you have got a question about the Christmas holiday, this is the man you need to pose a question to. You can do that by calling us at 800-450-7876, like Big Mike did in North Carolina. Big Mike, you're on with Brother Ashra Kwesi.
How you brothers doing? Brother Ashra Kwesi, how you doing, sir?
We got a little cold here, brother, but, this is a season for it.
Oh, those nerves.
Trying to get over it before next week, as Brother Carl said. We got to go to Ethiopia next week.
Wow, I wish I could be a stowaway on the luggage or something, or a bouncer or a bodyguard or something. But, brother, man, I've been studying. I've been studying a little bit about ancient Kemet for a few years now, and I would just like for you to maybe speak on something that you already touched on. What is it ever going to take, brother? What is it ever going to take for our people to snap out of this psychosis that we're in, that we had no future, that we had no past, that we came from, as the Bible biblically refers to us as heathen? And I fight back on that every time I hear it myself. But what is it going to take, brother? And I know you've been doing the work. You didn't put the miles in. What is it going to take for our people to snap out of this inclusion, this illusion of inclusion? And I look at the politics today, and we see how we're being treated in Africa, in certain parts of Africa, where they're shipping guns in to kill us off, and in our inner cities, the same thing is going on. So I just can't understand why we should be sitting back waiting for something instead of proactive. And I know you're going to touch on this, brother, and keep up doing what you're doing, brother. Ashe, and anything I can ever do, please, I'll be there when you call.
Thank you, my brother. Well, keep in mind, the reality of it, if it took 2,000 years to get into this, it's going to take 2,000 years to get out of this. We as an African people in the Western world, specifically where we are as Africans here in this country, have been out of physical slavery for approximately a little over 147 years. So that's 147 years. Now, we are still in mental enslavement. Now, when we start to build institutions to help educate, to liberate, then that's when we'll start to find our way. But we still feel that we can build churches on every corner, but we can't build our own schools and institutions. When you see other ethnic groups come here from other places, the first thing they start to do is build their own institutions to educate their people and even employ their people. We have been caught into this slave mentality that we still have got to always look towards Europeans because of the culture of slavery. The slave only looked to the master for everything he needed. And we still do that to this very day because we are still functioning in a slave culture. Now, I know that's hard to deal with, but that's the reality. If anyone can prove me wrong, then prove me wrong. What culture have we been in this country? Many things that we interact with each other. In many cases, it comes out of a slave culture. Not the culture of our experience of who we are as an African people, where we came from, our culture. There may be some culture that we see there, but for the most part, a lot of that culture that we interact with each other and how we interact with each other was due to the slave culture. So this is what we have got to start to do, what we're doing right now.
Thank you, brother.
Educating the community. Brother Carl's show comes on, and what does it say? Knowledge is power.
Oh, yeah. My brother, we're about to start a little something in North Carolina, here in northeastern North Carolina, where we're going to start taking our youth. We're going to start dealing with 6 to 10-year-olds and we're going to start teaching them this information. And
I'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina on January 26th.
You'll be in Charlotte. See, we're on the other side, and we would love to have you here, brother. Mm-hmm. Actually, you would be very helpful in getting the message out here in this area. You know where we live. We're in the Bible Belt, brother, and it's a great resistance, even though our young brothers are still killing each other in the streets, and the antidote is for us to be educated. So I'll be keeping in touch, brother. I'll email you, and hopefully we'll invite you to come on the eastern side of North Carolina, because we need you here, bro. Because a lot of parents have put their hands up with the youth. They're running wild. And I think if we start with the young, my theory is if we start with the younger ones, we can prevent this from happening in the future. We can slow this crime rate down in our community.
Well, you're right about that. The youth, they are the seed. They are, and they are the seed that turns into the crop.
God bless, brother.
All right.
I'll keep in touch. I'll call you.
Thank you, Big Mike. Thanks for your call. 800-450-7876. Go to Johnny in Long Beach, California. Johnny, you're on with Brother Ashra Kwesi.
Hey, Carl, Brother Kwesi. You know what? You're speaking music to my ears, especially when you're talking about Christmas. However, on Fox, they'll say that you're part of the war on Christmas.
You say what now?
You're speaking music to my ears, but on Fox, they would say that you're part of the war on Christmas.
Well, I'm sure the banking system would not want to hear all of this, and all those people are making all the money. I'm sure they would not want to hear all of this, especially if people realize that the twinkles and lights and bells or for them to get caught up and spend all their money and to help pick up the gross national product. So, of course, they wouldn't want to hear all of this or make people at least think about what they're doing.
You're right, because I stopped celebrating Christmas in 1971. I stopped for reasons, being away from home, being in the military, and being that time of the year being so depressing, and that's one of the things, one of the reasons why I quit celebrating it. The other one is that I married a Jehovah's Witness, so that too had something to do with it. But I never let Christmas be the thing that, when it came to my kids, giving them gifts, because our thing was we give you a gift all year round. So that would dispel that about giving gifts on Christmas. But there was something else you said about as far as teaching, what we learned about Christianity. I don't know. I'm just. Are you a Christian? Do you believe in God? Are you an atheist?
I'm not a Christian of the Western world or any sort of type of any fashion.
Okay, so you don't. So but you're not an agnostic either, right? So you do believe in God.
Well, first of all, let's get clear on some things here. Okay. The reason why the world has the whole spiritual idea of God came from African people in the first place. The Western world would not even have an idea of God if it was not for African people. The very fact that we say Amen at the end of our prayers, okay, many of us don't realize that is an African deity. That is an African God, to start with African people, that was taken by the Greeks. The Greeks are the ones who took Amen up out of Africa, and this is how we got Amen in our prayers. When we go to Timothy chapter 6, and it talks about Amen. Now keep in mind, the image of Amen in ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt was always jet black. He represented the invisible spirit in all of us, the invisible spirit that permeates throughout all the universe. Now here, physicists are talking about dark matter that's all around us, that's part of us, that's inside of us, that permeates throughout all the universe. And it's interesting that in Timothy chapter 6 it says that who alone has immortality, dwelling in unapproachable light, whom no man has seen or can see, to whom be the honor and everlasting power. Amen. So, African people, we are a very spiritual people. The problem is that our representation of God in the angelical realm is in a European image. As peace be upon him, another Grand Master teacher, Dr. Clark, would say, what Europeans did was colonize the afterlife. So our whole mental representation, every time we think of God, or we think of a white God, we think of white heaven. Why? Because we see white angels and all these things that they've created.
Hang on a second, Brother Kwesi, and Johnny as well, because we got to take another break. 800-450-7876, number to call, speak to Ashra Kwesi, discussing Christmas.
Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
And we're back, folks, with Brother Ashra Kwesi discussing the season, Christmas, where all these, where all this started from, the story where it all started back in ancient Kemet. Also, just want to remind you, some of you can see some stuff like this tonight on ABC Network. I think Christiane Amanpour is going to do a special, goes back to the Bible, and she talks about the flood and the all kinds of stuff in her special on ABC tonight. I think that's at 9 o'clock. Eastern and Pacific time as well. But speaking about Pacific, we got Long Beach, California's Johnny on the line. Johnny, you got another question for Brother Ashra Kwesi?
Well, yeah, no, actually, it's like, to be honest about it, no, to be honest, I'm intrigued about the things that you're saying, Mr. Kwesi, and I believe it's to be true. But when you talk to some ministers, it would seem to me that you would be in conflict with them. Have you had discussions with black ministers where was there any conflict that occurred?
Well, the majority of ministers go to a white seminary school to learn a white theology. So, of course, when you start talking about the spiritual stories that existed in Africa thousands of years ago, especially that I revealed to many brothers and sisters that I take back annually every year on temples and tombs, now they're totally oblivious to. They know nothing about, in many cases, I'm not talking about all ministers, but many ministers, they know nothing about the information I'm talking about. You guys excuse me because I'm suffering from a very bad cold right now. So, of course, they're going to be in conflict, because their whole Western teaching of a white theology, a Western version of Christianity. In some cases, they don't even know about the African Christians, about the African Gnostics that I talked about, that you have to be your own Christ, and those who fought against tyranny of the Romans, and like Cyprian, who got his head cut off, and like many other Christians, we don't know about why, when we look at the Romans who were persecuting Christians, they don't tell you that they were persecuting African Christians. Where did Christianity start in the first place? Alexandria, Egypt. Why Alexandria, Egypt? Alexandria, Egypt is the place where they have thousands of scrolls, when they built this Alexandria library that is now burned down by the Christians, like it is believed is burned down by Theodosius in the 4th century A.D. But where did they get these scrolls? From ancient temples that are still there that we go to every year, like Ipit-Asut, that is now called Karnak. Also Ipit-Risut, that is now called Luxor, the Temple of Dandara, the Temple of Hered-Ru, the Temple of Menefer, the Temple of Inu. These were places that Aristotle plundered for Alexander, robbing the ancient tombs. It took thousands of years to create this knowledge from our empirical observation of Mutnechet. There they housed those thousands and thousands of scrolls in the Alexandria Library. This was Alexander's wish. This is the sacred knowledge that African people created that took them thousands of years before the Western world was even in existence. The fact that we even write 2012, we're only adhering to a Western time. We're adhering to Augustus Caesar's time period. How can you count time down and then start time back up? At least that should make us think about something. So, of course, when there are ministers who are thinking outside, the European Western point of view. But like I always say, he who circumscribes your circumference determines the ambit of your thinking. So if we let the Western world circumscribe our circumference to think that nothing else existed until the Europeans in the Western version of Christianity, as well as the other religions, it's not just doing Christianity, but Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism, and Krishna, all of these things would not exist if it was not for the fallopian tube of the Nile Valley that gave birth to spirituality that led into the religions of today.
Brother Kwesi, don't they have black seminary schools? Do they teach?
I'm sorry, was that again?
These black theologians, don't they have some black seminary schools as well, or do they teach the stuff they teach at the white schools?
You have for the most part, the umbrella of the Western Church is a white seminary school. That one goes to to learn a Western theology. And that is primarily based off of the Western version of Christianity, for the most part, based off of the ecumenical conferences that created the Western Christianity that I talked about, starting with the Conference of Nicene in 325 A.D. and dealing with Chalcedon and Ephesus, which is the one that I talked about earlier, where they de-Africanized, okay, the goddess Aset, the prototype of the Madonna and Child, and the creation of the European Mary and Jesus. Now, I know that's hard for people to understand, but even if you just look at something very simple, Carl, Jesus is Greek. The Gnostics were the key people group of early Christians, okay, in Egypt, who were like a conduit, okay, during that time, okay, who drew from the ancient spiritual world of our ancestors and went back thousands of years, and they are the ones who understood the spiritual meaning. That's why the Romans persecuted all of them, because they did not want the world to know how the Western world developed their ideas from which you see on those temples and tombs of ancient Egypt and ancient papyruses and scrolls that I talked about. In fact, when they took and unearthed, we go through this area of Nag Hammadi. Nag Hammadi is an area on our way to Aptu that I talked about earlier, which is the world's first holy city that I talked about, of the world's first Immaculate Conception. But going through this area called Nag Hammadi is famous because it was an Egyptian who was traveling and found some of the earliest Gnostic writing. This is how we know about the early Gnostic writings and about their early spiritual teachings. And this is what the Western church, okay, the Byzantine Romans, okay, did everything to make sure that none of the Gnostic writings would be part of the biblical Bible that they were creating at this time, because it had the spiritual understanding of what the Christ represented, and what I talked about earlier, what the Christ represented, that the Gnostic Christ, okay, the Gnostics understood, or the Gnostic Christ understood, that this was about a spiritual development that we all have within ourselves. It was not about the deification of we see as this Jesus character. The Gnostics, as I said, or the black Gnostic Christ, they held that every man and woman, they saw that we had our own divine spark within us for our own spiritual development. That spiritual development was a development of your ka, your spirit, who the Gnostics called the Charis, who the Romans called Christ. But the Romans at that time were into the spiritual enslavement of humanity. And through the spiritual enslavement of humanity was through the deification of themselves. So they created a Serapis Jesus. And that the image of that Serapis Jesus is the image that permeates the Western world and America to this very day. It started during the time when they created it. So they feared the fact that if the people understood that they all are a Christ, meaning that when you look at a Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, these men were their own Christ. They rose up their spiritual development, okay? They knew they were going to die. They knew they were going to be killed. But because of what they were teaching, their ka, their spirit, this is what made them a Christ. This is what a Christ is. This is what the teachings of what our ancestors taught thousands of years ago. And that personified in the earliest teachings that go back thousands of years, that earliest teaching was Asar, Aset, and Haru. And Haru personified that Christ that we all had to become, our own Christ, okay, to rise up against tyranny and oppression, to rise up and develop our own spiritual development. And this time of the year, of the winter solstice, was to go through what they refer to as a kames, a spiritual birth. And this is but unfortunately, we can't see anything related to a spiritual birth because we're caught in material madness right now. And this is the basis and foundation of the Western church, is based off of a physical resurrection, that you will rise up out that grave in your physical body and go into heaven, your flesh and your blood. This is morbid. This is the Romans' teaching. Right. Where the ancient spiritual kames was based off of a spiritual birth. You will leave this physical body to the earth, but the spiritual body that they refer to, that once the ba, that they refer to as the soul, and the ka, okay, which is the spirit, once that came together, you became a kames, a spiritual birth. And this is what caused your whole spiritual ascension. But it started in your mortal life now through your own spiritual development. And this is what the Romans feared, that the Gnostics were teaching, that our ancestors took thousands of years to document this spiritual understanding. We are an ancient people. We African people were not just standing around waiting for Europeans and other people to come. So when you look at the various Krishna, born of Immaculate Conception, that's the takeoff of ancient Egypt as well. When you look at Buddha, so that story goes around the world. When you look at Quetzalcoatl, long before the Spaniards came there, that also is Madonna Child. How did it get there? That was carried. That spiritual story was carried. Like it was carried into Greece and Rome and became the Marian Jesus that we see today, a corruption, even though corrupted from Osiris Set and Haru.
Let's go to Raymond in Ohio. Raymond.
Yes, sir, Brother Carl. Look here, my brother. I'm going to nominate you for Black Man of the Year. I got people listening to you, brother, all over Ohio. They love your show. They just don't call in. You got a hell of a show, good brother. And to that brother.
Hello?
Yeah, Brother Kwesi.
I'm sorry, we missed each other there for a second. I had to run from the phone.
Yeah, okay. We got Brother Raymond in Ohio's got a question for you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Excellent truth, my brother. That's pure. That's pure Black Messiah God truth right there. Okay, and I'm gonna make a little short comment. Then I'm gonna ask you 2 questions, and I know you can answer them. But when I tell Black people that I'm a god, that they look at me like I'm crazy, okay? And when I pull out Psalms 82:6, which says that I have said that ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High, they simmer down. Why are we as Black people scared to claim our Black godliness and Black goddessness? We are the original people on this planet. And closing with my comment, I always read Francis Cresswell sings chapter about the Christmas tree, which is really a symbol for the cross and the Black man's private parts. When you decorate that tree, Brother Carl and my brother, the first thing that usually goes on that tree is the balls, which is representation of the Black man's private parts. What I'm getting at, during our forced enslavement, these Christian heathens would cut our balls off of the Black man while he was hanging on the tree, and the Caucasian woman would take the testicles home for souvenirs, today known as Christmas gifts, okay? This is truth. You know it, brother. Then when they got rid of the tree, they burned it, just like they used to burn the Black man in a pit. Now, tree hanging started during the Roman era, and the so-called Khazars, erroneously called Jews, was part of that tree hanging. Acts 10:39 states, it says that, and we are witnesses of all things which he did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. And when I was growing up, and I'm closing, they had 4 Christmas lights, okay? They was black, they was red, and they was green, and they had some orange in there every now and then. I'm 62, bro. I'm telling you some facts. Now, if you look at this Christmas mess, I call it X-mess. What color are the lights? All white. You don't even see the brown reindeer no more with that fairy tale. Everything is white. Christmas lights, Christmas trees, all the characters. And Black people, we got to get away from this garbage. It ain't nothing but fairy tale. It ain't nothing but heathenistic, hellacious things to control our minds. And it's time for us to wake up. And my question to you, my brother, do you believe in a leap year? I'm Aquarius. How can a person believe in a leap year? Okay, this is 2013 coming, and if you believe in a leap year, when this leap to 2014, could you explain that to me? Because I'm a little bit into astrology and astronomy, which the Black man, the Black woman invented anyway. And I'll get off the phone, and brother, keep spewing that truth, good brother. Peace.
You had a whole lot there. We still on, Carl?
Yeah, we're still on. Yeah, we're still on.
All right. Well, keep in mind, when we look at the Julius Caesar calendar and the Gregorian calendar, these are all Roman calendars. And keep in mind, the world wouldn't even have a calendar if it was not for African people who made the first calendar. One of the areas that I go to in Kemet, and I take our group to, is in Kamombo. And in fact, a lot of things that we talk about, Brother Carl, I reflect to a lot of the reliefs in ancient Kemet over the years. And here in Kamombo, you see carved in stone one of the world's earliest calendars. And this is, like I said, long before the Julius Caesar's calendar and the Gregorian calendar. And this calendar was based off of the heliacal rising of the star Civil Septa that the Romans called Ceres and the Greeks called Sothis. And it's the heliacal rising of that star that gave them the time of 4,236. When you add on to that, at least we should be writing 6,252. Why should we be writing 2012? Because we're adhering to somebody else's time. Europeans have always come to power and changed time. Even George Bush, okay, I think, what did he do? Change the clock forward, backwards? So the time is really, not in time at all when we think about, where we are. But we have to go back to how our ancestors calculated time, and that time was based off of stellar time, cosmic time, scientific time, not based off of the creation of mystical people and characters and so forth.
Brother Kwesi, the question I was asking you, when you go back to Egypt and you go to Alexandria, Cairo, and the museums and that trip along the Nile, do you show the folks that you take with you, do you show them these things inside these temples?
Oh, without question. In fact, anyone who's listening to the program now, you can go to YouTube, Kemet Nu, that's Kemetnu, okay, 6,240 I have there. And you'll see a lot of the clippings. I'm lecturing right there at the pyramids, temples, and tombs, or you can go to our website at Kemetnu, again, KEMETNU.com. And there we go under the little black boxes to your left, view videos in Egypt. And there I have several lectures where I'm lecturing inside of the pyramids and different places and tombs and so forth. And again, so if a person cannot go with us, at least they can journey there through the visual documentation that we have there. And then, of course, a lot of the information that we're talking about now, Carl, the African Origin of Christianity is a DVD we have on there. That DVD is a DVD that's documenting all the information that I'm talking about in relationship to what we're talking about now. And it's very well in detail with a lot of the documentation from the field research.
What about the incense? Was it frankincense, myrrh, and what else?
A lot of the rituals that we see in the Catholic, especially in the Roman Catholic Church, okay, a lot of these rituals came out from ancient Egypt. Okay, when we see the incense, the burning of the incense, and the priest, shaking the incense, this was done when the priests walked through the temples of Egypt, especially when you look at the Temple of Karnak, or that our ancestors referred to as Ipidasut. Here you have 134 massive columns. We can imagine when they walked down that nave, they had the sistrums where they would shake the sistrums, and then they had the people shaking the incense. So that's all part of an African tradition. In fact, when we go to Ethiopia, to this very day, in those ancient churches of Ethiopia that we go to in Lalibela and other areas, these monolithic churches, you still see the priests there using the incense, okay, just like they did in ancient Egypt when they came through the building into the sacred places. They would walk through these areas, with the frankincense and myrrh and all the various scents that they of incense that they have. So this tradition is still going on, and like I said, we'll be leaving for Ethiopia on the 27th of this month, going to Ethiopia, where brothers and sisters can see some of the early African churches that were built there. It still baffles the Western world of how these structures were built. But, of course, now they see the magnificent structures that were built in Lalibela. Then, of course, Europeans have come up with the fact that, Africans in Ethiopia didn't build this. Some Knights Templars actually built this. This is in Graham Hancock's book called The Sign and the Seal, where he actually literally put in there that Africans didn't build those churches, that the Knights Templars came and built the churches for Ethiopia and then went back to Europe. But this is part of the psychopathic racism, that anytime you see something great in Africa, it had to be done by somebody else, not by Africans themselves. These structures were carved deep into volcanic rock, 40 feet down, and dug out into these structures that you see today. There are 11 of these churches in the area of Lalibela. So, this is a magnificent place that we go to annually every year as well. And we see that when you travel to these areas, when I first traveled to Ethiopia back in the early 80s, you see the Black Madonna that they had in the churches. Now they have removed the Black Madonna now, and the Europeans are coming there with their Western version of Christianity and paying the people to put up a white Serapis Jesus. And many people look and see the carvings are chiseled out in the churches. The Jesuits did that when they came there during the time of the Portuguese. They chiseled out the black angelical images and divinity of African people in the churches of Ethiopia during this time. So Europeans have always tried to destroy black divinity.
All right. Hold on a second, Brother Kwesi. When we come back, tell us, too, about Santa Claus, how that name came, and Father Christmas, or what do they call him, Nick, whatever they call him. Tell us about that. 800-450-7876. We'll take your phone calls for Ashra Kwesi on 1450 WOL right after this.
And
now back to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450.
1450 WOL Radio.
Now we're back with Brother Ashra Kwesi discussing the Christmas season. Got some folks who want to talk to you. But before we go to the phones, Brother Kwesi, if you can quickly tell us how they came up with the names Santa Claus, and I was searching for Saint Nick. How they came up with the names for that particular person.
Yeah, we were discussing that in the early part of the show in terms of how these are part of the pagan and heathen customs of Europe. And unfortunately, we, like I said before, we were so caught up into the whole trinkets and lights and bells and all these types of things that we have not looked at or wanted to see where these things came from. Like, for instance, the name Santa Claus, and that's the corruption of St. Nicholas. Now, St. Nicholas was a Roman Catholic bishop who lived in the 4th century. St. Nicholas, he was a bishop of Myra, a saint. He was honored by the Greeks and the Latin. Now, if you look at Santa Claus's nickname is Saint Nick. That's another name for Santa Claus. Which now, if you look at Webster's dictionary, okay, Saint Nick means the devil. So when you look at see the whole idea of Santa Claus and see the whole Saint Nick, and it's all associated with the devil. But if you go back to an earlier origin in Greece, he was called Cronus, where he ate his babies. That's what Cronus did. He ate his babies. And now that is part of the Western art, that anyone who knows Cronus, he's eating his baby. You see the blood flowing down his baby. And when you look at the candy cane and you see the red and the white on the candy cane, that symbolized what Cronus had eaten his baby. When you have an elf or a baby attached to the candy cane. Now, I know this is some gross information for people to think about this time of the year. And we're caught up in the festivities of these things and feel like we're trying to destroy their holiday. But some of the things that I'm talking about here, Carl, is the same thing that's on the National Geographic talked about the other night. Okay, so it's not something that just Ashra Kwesi is saying. It's something that even they talk about, even on their own documentaries like National Geographic. Now, when he came out of Greece and went into Rome, okay, he is now called Saturnalia. Okay, Saturnalia equally feared that the baby would overtake his throne. Okay, Saturnalia became Santa Claus. So this is part of their pagan holidays that we see associated with Santa Claus. And then, of course, the Germanic tribe, okay, he was called Kris Kringles, okay, that represented an elf that ran around in a red suit. So these are the various names that we're familiar with, the names associated with Santa Claus. Now, I find it very interesting that last year, Wisconsin, now I heard that they had banned, I don't know if this ban, if it came through or not, but they were planning on banning the people playing Santa Claus in Wisconsin because all the pedophiles come out during this time of the year, and they found that many of these people who were pedophiles playing Santa Claus were fondling the children. So if you look at the history of Santa Claus, okay, representing the devil, and you associate it with the things that's going on today, that's some serious stuff to think about when we see what's happening with the pedophiles coming out to play Santa Claus, Brother Carl.
Twitter question for you, Brother Kwesi. It says, here's a question that Johnny asked. He says, do you believe in God? Will you ask the Brother Kwesi if he knows exactly what a person means by the question, do you believe in God? He says, many people ask this question. Not many are able to explain what they mean by the question.
Well, when first people say, people have, what is their concept of God? First of all, I say, I believe in God from what their perception is. If they see God as a being, okay, looking down and controlling everything that we do. No, I do not believe in that kind of. There's a God up there in a human form looking down on us. No, I do not believe in that. Okay, that is, for the most part, it's a Western version of the deification of the male gender. That's why God is always referred to as he. As he. He did this for me. Okay, that's the Western point of view. In the African spiritual concept, God was referred to as God and Goddess. It was referred to as the spiritual balance. Now, I refer to, and the concept of God is beyond our comprehension, but in terms of a divine spirit, okay, of the universe, yes, I know that to be part of us. We are part of it, but it's beyond our human comprehension. So we bring it down to, for us to understand it, we humanize it. And most people see some God sitting up on a throne in a heaven looking down on us, okay, determining whether we're doing good or bad. Okay, no, that's a human understanding of God. I do not believe in that.
So you believe it's a spirit?
It's a divine spirit of the universe is beyond our comprehension to even understand that divine energy. If we look at it as dark matter, let's look at it as Kemet anthropomorphized almond. If physicists are talking about this black matter, this dark matter that's all around us, okay, this is part of the divine spirit of the universe. African people brought God, okay? We are the last people to say we don't believe in a divine spirit of the universe. There's a divine energy of the universe. Now, whether you call it God, we call it by various names, okay? In Kemet, we may say Amen, we may say Amen Ra, we may say Bata, depending on what period it is, okay? Another part of Africa, we may call it Ngai, Oda de Mere. So it's a divine spirit, okay? But if I see God as some type of being looking down on everything, no, I do not believe in that. But I think that there is a divine spirit of the universe that humanity, that started with African people, referred to as various names that we call God today, that our ancestors called it by various names to recognize that divine spirit of the universe.
Brother Kwesi, we've got about a minute left.
Most of us see God, we see it through Michelangelo's painting, some white guy coming out to heaven. So.
What did our ancestors, we got about a minute left, so if you can do this real quick, what did our ancestors worship then? Because if there was no Jesus, there was no, before there was a Jesus Christ, before there was even different religions. So what did our ancestors worship?
They worshiped what they gave praise to was recognizing that Ka within that permeates throughout all the universe, that spirit within. It's interesting enough, it says the kingdom of heaven is within. Most of us spend all of our time looking out and don't realize that everything that we have is within ourselves.
All right,
this is what our ancestors gave recognition and praise to.
Brother Kwesi, we got to roll out of here. Have a good, safe trip to Ethiopia. When you get back from Addis, we'll do this again. But tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
Well, of course, you can go to our website. That's Kemetnu, KEMETNU.com. We do our annual trips to Egypt every summer in July, and we do our Ethiopia, which will be going next week, okay, in December. And also you can, to our email, that's Kemetnu at sbcglobal.net. Again, that's Kemetnu at sbcglobal.net. Again, if you go to the website, you can order DVDs that can go more in depth with visual documentation, video produced by us, that can give you more clarity than what we talked about here. But it's an honor to be on your show, Brother Carl, for Communiversity. And again, I'm sorry, with the way, you travel a lot in these airplanes, brother, you get these codes on and off. So, but again, it's always great to be on the show for another African Communiversity, because knowledge, again, is power.
All right, Brother Kwesi, stay up.
Ashra and Merira Kwesi are lecturers on African history, civilization, religion, and culture. The duo present lively and dynamic presentations and video productions based on their extensive study and travel on the African continent. These national and international lecturers also conduct the annual Kemetnu Know Thyself educational tours to Egypt and Ethiopia. Brother and Sister Kwesi link the historical with the present by means of visual documentation to bring our story to life. For lectures, videos, audio media, or Egypt and Ethiopia tour brochures, contact Ashra or Merira Kwesi at Kemet New Productions, 214-371-0206.